Have you ever met someone who is brilliant at something you thought you understood, and when you talk to it, you realize that they see it completely differently than you? I had this experience in my life with a billionaire, and it completely flipped how I think about money. And that's what we're going to talk about next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
After working for 25 years in banking here in New York, I've had the privilege of knowing two billionaires. One I know incredibly well. Let's call him Andrew. I learned more about money from Andrew than I ever did as a CPA, as a banker, or even in business school. He didn't talk about how to invest. There are a lot of books on that and courses on that, and they all seem to contain the same information more or less. Some are really good, some are just okay, but they all talk about similar ideas. But what he talked about was his money management style, what he does with his money. And I've got to say, what I thought I knew and what he did were completely different in many cases. And as it turned out, for him anyway, and for many people, what he has to say makes a lot more sense. And to be super clear, the ultra-wealthy don't hold classes on this type of thing. And frankly, what they do often is instinctive. It's not something that you actually learn in business school or in a course, but it works really well. They don't hand out their playbook. You don't become a billionaire by telling people how you became a billionaire. Frankly, to learn from them, you need to watch them because they're not going to sit there and tell you this is what you do right and this is what you do wrong. That's not what they do. You just observe and see the results. By the way, that's not just how they build an empire. It's also how they run their day-to-day lives. And some of the information might seem counterintuitive, but then when you get right into it, you'll have an aha moment. And just so you know, everything we're going to talk about, I actually do. I actually use these tools myself. And I'm not a billionaire, but these tools will work for the vast majority of people. Maybe not everybody, but for a large portion of people, and most of them you probably haven't thought about. All right, let's get into it. The next lesson I learned from Andrew is automate everything that you can. And his rationale is simple. For routine tasks that don't require human intervention, when you put a human in the middle, something can go wrong. He used the accounting department example at his company. When he started his company, up until about 10 years ago, he had something like 10 accountants working in the billing department or somewhere in and around the accounting function. Now he has two. And besides the cost being 1/5, 1/10 of what it was before, everything is done, and it's done extremely well. Very effective, no mistakes. And he said, candidly, I had a lot of control issues around this because I want to be able to walk up to somebody and ask them about something happening in the flow of information in the accounting department. That was his background. But to outsource that, or to automate that, is probably a better way to describe it, caused him some stress until he saw that the results were much, much better. And automation happens everywhere. Think about your phone. Some of the processes that you used to take weeks engaging in can be done in a split second on your phone. We have a sponsor called BOLDIN, Personal Financial Planning Software. It's the personal financial planning software that I personally use. And BOLDIN is a wonderful resource for people that are looking to not build spreadsheets every day and hope that the information turns out correctly at the end of the month. By the way, if you're interested, you can contact BOLDIN at go.boldin.com/Holy Schmidt, and they will give you 2 weeks free of their full-featured software. After that, it's about $12 a month. The next thing I learned from Andrew is that he doesn't spend money on junk. He doesn't spend money on anything in his personal life that doesn't give him great joy. And more importantly, because of this, he keeps that spending to a tiny slice of his total income. Now, it's very easy to keep your joyful spending to a tiny slice of your total income when you're a billionaire. But actually, if you look at how he spends, most people watching this video spend more on stuff than he does. Money doesn't burn a hole in his pocket. Now, he drives a Mercedes S-Class sedan. Now, it's a wonderful car, don't get me wrong, but it's not a Rolls Royce, it's not a Bentley. It costs 1/4 of the cost of some of those automobiles. He likes to drive, so he feels like he's entitled to a nice car. But it's almost an invisible car. When you see it, you don't look at it and point like you would if he was driving a Rolls Royce. And that is exactly what he wants. When I visited his home, it's a little bigger and a little bit nicer than some of the other homes in the neighborhood, but it's in a middle-class neighborhood. It's just done really well. And it's extremely clean and filled with things that make him happy. A few prints that are framed and some original art from artists that nobody knows, but they're really nice pieces. And everything is clean, uncluttered, and intentional. That, more than anything else, jumped out at me about his residence. Now, I contrast that with the myriad of celebrities that are on television, on social media, who talk about their 4 or 5 houses, hundreds of acres of land, and they will take you on a tour of their house. Why do they do that? Frankly, I'm not sure, other than the fact that maybe they feel like they should, but that lifestyle is really expensive. So you have to spend a lot of money to present that image to the world. Next, he rents the experience. He finds a way to rent just about everything he can that he doesn't use constantly. And I'm talking about everything. He shares a passion that I share, which is skiing. And he goes to Aspen 1 month a year. And every time he goes, he rents the same house. I asked him why he doesn't own a house. He could have 3 or 4. He could have 10 houses. And he said, why would I own a house in one of the most expensive cities in the world if I didn't actually live there 11 months out of the year? And my response was, well, you're renting it at the most expensive time of the year. He said, yes, but even if I pay double or triple what other people would pay at another point in time, it's still a huge money loser for me because I'm not going to rent out my home when I'm not there. And then it hit me. This is a perfect example of spending smart. And in retirement, people oftentimes think they're spending smart because they're buying an asset that they're going to use again and again, but invariably they're not using it regularly. Think about a motorhome. A lot of people own an RV in retirement, but those that own the RV might use it for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months a year, or they might go on a 1-year tour or a 6-month tour or a 3-month tour with that RV and then never use it again. So why wouldn't you just rent it for that period of time? Vacation homes. People will own a home somewhere and use it 1 or 2 months a year. They live in their primary residence where their family is, and the vacation home sits empty for a large portion of the time. Why not just rent a vacation home? You can rent a vacation home in a country club community for a lot less than buying that same home in the country club community, if that's your thing, of course. Next, think about tools and equipment. Now, I love tools. I have a lot of tools. I use a lot of tools, but truth be told, there are tools that I buy that I never use or use once. Don't buy a power washer, chainsaw, or even a ladder if you're going to use it once a year. Home Depot, for example, has great options to rent instead of buy some of the equipment that they have there. Another example is a boat. Most people who own boats use them on the weekends, maybe every weekend, maybe not every weekend. I would say a lot of boat owners might use them 1 or 2 weekends a summer, put the boat in the water, let it sit in the dock, and then take it out at the end of the summer and then repeat again. That scenario is a very expensive proposition. Now, if you use your boat every weekend or a couple of times a week, that might be different. I'm talking about renting something that you might use occasionally. The mindset of renting the experience rather than owning the burden is one of the big secrets that the wealthy use to stay wealthy. Yes, it is far more expensive per hour to rent than to own, but if you only use that asset for 20, 30, 40 hours a year, it becomes incredibly cheap under most circumstances. Next, he invests like his life depends on it, literally. I asked him about some of the things that he did with his money, and he puts money back into his company. He could just let it ride. He could put it in maintenance mode and do extremely well with the cash flow coming from the company. But he puts a lot of that money back into the company. He puts money into the markets. And he knows where every dollar goes, every single dollar. And he's not afraid to manage his money down to the dollar. Next, understanding risk is far more important than getting an outsized reward for him. Now, when you ask him about anything of substance in his life, he starts off by talking about what can go wrong. In fact, I would say he does it with things that most people wouldn't consider of substance. At one point, he was in New York, and I told him, I know the best coffee shop in the area. It's about 5 blocks away, but it was later in the afternoon and I wasn't sure if they were still open. But I said, hey, let's take a walk. I figured I could actually pick his brain on the walk. And he came back to me and said, until we know that the coffee shop is open, I don't really want to go for a walk because that's 30 minutes of my time that I can be using for something else. I don't want to take that risk. There was another time I was going to make an introductory meeting between him and somebody else. And I said, because it's introductory, we don't really need to do much in terms of preparation. It's more of a meet and greet. But he wanted a full debrief, or pre-brief, I would say is probably a better word, on the person we were going to meet. And when you talk to him about investing in an idea, a company, a product, a fad, whatever it is, he starts with how many customers will actually buy this? What's the likelihood that they'll want to buy it? And how do we get out if that population of people isn't there to buy it? What's the exit strategy? Most people, by the way, can't answer any of these questions before they invest. They just hope it works out. Next, we talk about his philosophy on debt. And he sees debt as a tool, not a liability, not something that you throw the dice on. If you don't know that when you go into debt, you're going to be able to pay it off easily and the benefit outweighs the cost of the debt, then don't do it. He has a mortgage, even though he doesn't need a mortgage. Now, why is that? Well, because he has a 3% mortgage and he can do something better with his money than 3%, usually. He has personal loans. He has a company loan. All of these things add debt to his portfolio, but he's redeploying that debt into things that make more money. And I joked about credit card debt, and he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, when debt becomes a way to finance your life rather than to improve your life, then you've done something wrong. His next point is that you should always have a great personal relationship with your banker, even if you're at a chain of banks. Why is that? Because you can have a lot of conversations and you can learn a lot from your banker. Your banker will tell you things that they're not obligated to tell you about, but they'll do it anyway. Also, if you need your bank to step up, that personal relationship means that you have an advocate at the branch that you go into every so often. And finally, the money rules. And there are a lot of money rules out there, what percentage you should invest in different buckets. But his philosophy is very simple. Invest 25% of everything you make in tax-efficient investments. So that's a pre-tax number. And the rest is going to be dependent on your specific lifestyle. You can't say that person A only spends 50% of the balance while person B needs 65%, because that's not what you're managing to. You're managing to how much you can actually invest without going into debt. Now, this last point, I think, is valuable if you actually have a good handle on how you spend your money. But if you're just starting out and you need rules, well, there are rules out there that suggest that you should only spend so much, 50% on essentials, 25% on investing, 15% on things that you love to do, etc. But his point was, effectively, you start off with investing 25%, and then you start spending the balance on the most essential things, working your way down towards the things that you love to do, but don't necessarily need to do. That seems pretty rational to me. As a reminder, don't forget to check out BOLDIN Personal Financial Planning Software. Go to go.boldin.com/holyschmidt to get 2 weeks free. If you like this video, check out that video, 7 things you should stop doing after age 60. This is Jeff Schmidt, and I will see you in that video right there.